Welcome to TrueCrime Unveiled Podcast. Dive deep into the mysteries that captivate us. If you appreciate this episode, please consider liking and subscribing to support us. Today, we delve into a tragedy that etched itself into the American psyche. The Columbine High School Massacre, April 20th. 1999. A date forever synonymous with school violence. It's a case that continues to haunt and perplex, raising questions about bullying, mental health, and the dark undercurrents of seemingly ordinary suburban life. We'll unravel the events of that day, the meticulous planning by the perpetrators, and the lasting impact on the community and the nation. Join us as we try to understand what led to this horrific act. Columbine, Colorado. A picturesque town nestled against the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. It was considered a safe, idyllic place to raise a family. But beneath this veneer of tranquility, a storm was brewing. Two high school seniors, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, were harboring a deep-seated rage. They meticulously planned an attack on their school, an assault that would shock the world with its brutality and leave an enduring scar on the national consciousness. We'll examine the months leading up to the attack, exploring the warning signs that may have been missed, and the complex factors that contributed to this tragedy. The narrative often focuses on the day of the shooting itself, but we'll begin by exploring the lives of Harris and Klebold before the attack. We'll delve into their backgrounds, their relationships with peers, and their descent into darkness. Their writings, online activity, and interactions with others provide a fragmented but crucial insight into their mindset. It's important to understand their motivations, or the perceived lack thereof, to grasp the complexities of this case. We'll attempt to piece together the puzzle of their motivations. Was it bullying? Mental illness? A combination of factors? These are just some of the questions we'll explore in this series. Before the tragic events of April 20th, 1999, Columbine High School was nestled in the picturesque foothills of the Rocky Mountains in Littleton, Colorado. The community was considered a safe and desirable suburb of Denver, a place where families sought good schools and a tranquil environment. Life revolved around school activities, sports games, and the close-knit community bonds forged in this quiet corner of Colorado. Residents often spoke of the friendly atmosphere, the sense of security, and the shared values that permeated their daily lives. The backdrop of the majestic mountains provided a sense of serenity, a stark contrast to the horror that would soon unfold within the walls of the high school. Many described Littleton as an idyllic place to raise children, a community where violence seemed a distant and improbable threat. The feeling of safety was so deeply ingrained that many residents left their doors unlocked, a testament to the trust they placed in their neighbors and the peaceful nature of their town. Indeed, Columbine High School itself reflected the community's values. It was a modern, well-equipped institution, boasting a diverse student body of nearly 2,000 students. Academically, the school was known for its strong programs and dedicated teachers. Extracurricular activities flourished, from sports like football and soccer to academic clubs like debate and drama. Students recall a vibrant social scene, with bustling hallways and a palpable sense of school spirit. Friendships formed in classrooms, on playing fields, and during rehearsals for school plays, creating a complex web of connections that bound the student body together. The library, later the site of unimaginable carnage, was a hub of learning and social interaction, a place where students studied, researched, and connected with one another. There was a distinct sense of community within the school walls, mirroring the close-knit atmosphere of Littleton itself. Many students recall a typical high school experience, filled with the usual joys and challenges of adolescence. They remember football games under Friday night lights, the excitement of prom nights, and the anticipation of graduation. There were cliques and social groups, just like any other high school. But overall, students described a welcoming and inclusive environment. Teachers were dedicated to their students' success, both inside and outside the classroom, fostering a supportive learning environment. Parents were actively involved in school activities, further strengthening the sense of community. The school was, in many ways, a microcosm of Littleton itself, reflecting the town's values of safety, community, and a shared pursuit of the American dream. No one could have predicted that this idyllic setting would soon become the scene of one of the most horrific school shootings in American history. The victims of the Columbine shooting, like the community they belonged to, represented the diverse tapestry of American life. They were athletes, musicians, artists, scholars, and friends. They had dreams, aspirations, and futures brimming with possibility. They were sons, daughters, siblings, and friends, deeply loved and cherished by their families and peers. Their lives were tragically cut short, leaving a void in the hearts of those who knew them, and a scar on the conscience of a nation. Their stories, their personalities, and their contributions to the Columbine community are an essential part of understanding the profound impact of this tragedy. Remembering them as individuals, not just as victims, is crucial to honoring their memory and learning from the devastating events of that day. The spring of 1999 in Littleton, Colorado, seemed like any other. The Rockies were thawing, the days growing longer. Columbine High School, nestled against the foothills, was a typical American high school. Students were preoccupied with proms, end-of-year exams, and summer plans. There were sports rivalries, cliques, and the usual teenage dramas. Teachers prepared final assignments, grading papers, and looking forward to a break. The library was a hub of activity, a quiet sanctuary for studying. The cafeteria buzzed with lunchtime chatter. From the outside looking in, Columbine was a microcosm of suburban adolescence, a picture of normalcy. Yet, beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. A darkness was gathering. We need to examine the subtle shifts, the almost imperceptible cracks in this facade of ordinariness, to understand the tragedy that would unfold. Indeed, it's crucial to understand the context, the seemingly ordinary backdrop against which this extraordinary event took place. The atmosphere at Columbine, like many high schoolers, wasn't always harmonious. There were reports of bullying, social divisions, and underlying tensions. While these issues weren't unique to Columbine, they formed a part of the complex tapestry of the school's social environment. Some students felt marginalized, overlooked. Others thrived in the extracurricular activities, the sports teams, and the academic clubs. It's important to reconstruct the social dynamics, the various groups and subcultures that existed within Columbine, to understand the forces at play. The narrative often focuses on the perpetrators, but we need to understand the broader environment, the ecosystem in which they operated. We've spoken to former students, teachers, and community members who recall a growing sense of unease in the months leading up to the shooting. It wasn't anything concrete, more of a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Some described it as a palpable tension and unspoken anxiety. Others mentioned witnessing instances of harassment and intimidation, although these were often dismissed as typical high school behavior. Looking back, these seemingly insignificant incidents take on a new meaning, a chilling foreshadowing of the violence to come. They represent the subtle disruptions, the shadows that began to lengthen across the ordinary landscape of Columbine High. These whispers of unease, these seemingly minor acts of aggression, contribute to a more complete understanding of the events of April 20th. It's like revisiting a photograph of a peaceful landscape after learning that a tragedy occurred there. Suddenly, the familiar details take on a different significance. The shadows seem deeper, the smiles less genuine. The ordinary becomes imbued with a sense of foreboding. We begin to search for clues, for signs that we might have missed. And in the case of Columbine, these clues are scattered throughout the months leading up to the attack. They exist in the memories of those who were there, in the yearbooks and school newspapers, in the quiet whispers and unspoken anxieties that permeated the hallways. By piecing together these fragments, we can begin to construct a more complete picture of the tragedy, one that moves beyond the headlines and delves into the complex web of factors that contributed to it. The morning of April 20th, 1999, began like any other Tuesday at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. Students arrived for classes, unaware of the horror that would soon unfold. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, two senior students, had meticulously planned an attack on their school for over a year. Their plan involved planting bombs in the cafeteria, timed to detonate during the lunch rush. This was intended to drive students out of the building and into the line of fire, where Harris and Klebold would be waiting with an arsenal of weapons. The failure of these bombs to detonate significantly altered their plan, but it did not deter them from carrying out their horrific attack. They parked their cars in the student parking lot, each carrying a duffel bag filled with guns and ammunition. They began their assault just before 11:19 a.m. The initial attack took place outside the school building, near the west entrance. Harris and Klebold, armed with shotguns and semi-automatic weapons, began firing on students sitting outside, eating lunch. Rachel Scott was the first victim, fatally shot while eating lunch with a friend. Several other students were wounded in the initial volley of gunfire. The sound of explosions, initially believed to be from the failed bombs, and the rapid gunfire caused panic and confusion amongst the students. Many began to flee, running into the school or seeking cover wherever they could. The shooters then moved closer to the building, firing through the windows at students inside. This initial assault outside the school lasted only a few minutes, but set the stage for the horrific violence that would follow inside. Harris and Klebold then entered the school through the west entrance, continuing their shooting spree. They moved through the hallways, firing at anyone they encountered. They specifically targeted students hiding under tables in the library, throwing pipe bombs and firing their weapons indiscriminately. The library became the scene of the deadliest part of the massacre. The majority of the fatalities occurred within this confined space, as students huddled together, desperately trying to avoid the gunfire. The attack continued for approximately 45 minutes, with the two shooters moving through the school, seemingly at random, searching for victims. Law enforcement arrived on the scene shortly after the shooting began, but their initial response was cautious. The active shooter situation, combined with the initial belief that bombs had been detonated, made it difficult for officers to immediately enter the school. While SWAT teams were being assembled and a perimeter was being established, Harris and Klebold continued their rampage inside. The sound of gunfire and the screams of the students could be heard from outside, adding to the chaos and fear. The delayed entry allowed the shooters to continue their attack for an extended period, contributing to the high casualty count. Finally, just before noon, Harris and Klebold retreated to the library, where they ultimately took their own lives. The silence following the gunfire was almost as deafening as the shots themselves. The initial chaos and screams gave way to an eerie quiet, punctuated by the distant sirens growing louder. Inside the school, survivors huddled in classrooms, some wounded, all terrified. The scene outside was one of utter pandemonium. Parents frantically searched for their children, desperate for any news. Ambulances and police cars swarmed the area, their flashing lights painting a stark picture against the backdrop of the otherwise peaceful suburban landscape. The image of students fleeing the school, some covered in blood, some carrying the injured, became seared into the nation's memory. This wasn't just a school shooting. It was a scene from a nightmare, unfolding in broad daylight. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and grief, the scale of which was difficult to comprehend in those initial hours. The fear was palpable. It wasn't just confined to Columbine or even Littleton. It spread like wildfire across the country. Parents everywhere suddenly saw their own children's schools as potential targets. The illusion of safety, the sanctity of these learning environments, had been shattered. Every loud noise, every unfamiliar face, became a source of anxiety. Schools across the nation implemented new security measures, metal detectors, security guards, locked doors, in a desperate attempt to regain some sense of control. The fear wasn't just about the immediate threat of violence. It was about the realization that something fundamental had shifted. The world, as they knew it, had changed irrevocably. This wasn't just a tragedy. It was a turning point, a moment that redefined the American education system and instilled a pervasive sense of unease in communities nationwide. The initial reports were fragmented and often contradictory. The number of casualties remained unclear for hours. Rumors swirled about the motives of the shooters, their identities still unknown to the public. The media descended upon Columbine, transforming the quiet town into a focal point of national attention. Every television screen displayed images of the school, the surrounding streets, the grieving families. The constant barrage of information, often speculative and unverified, only amplified the sense of confusion and fear. The nation watched in horror, grappling with the reality of what had happened, and struggling to understand how such a tragedy could occur. The investigation was just beginning, a massive undertaking involving local, state, and federal agencies. The crime scene itself was vast and complex, encompassing the entire school building and the surrounding grounds. Investigators meticulously combed through the debris, searching for clues, collecting evidence, and piecing together the events of that horrific day. The task was not just about finding answers. It was about bringing a sense of closure to a community shattered by violence, and hopefully preventing such a tragedy from ever happening again. The weight of expectation was immense. The nation demanded answers, and the pressure on the investigators was enormous. Let's delve deeper into the psychological profiles of Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. Much of the initial reporting painted them as outcasts, members of the so-called trenchcoat mafia, bullied and ostracized. While elements of social isolation were present, a closer examination reveals a more nuanced picture. Harris, in particular, demonstrated a complex mix of grandiosity and insecurity. His journal entries reveal a belief in his own superiority, fantasies of cleansing the world, and a deep-seated rage against humanity. Yet, he also expressed feelings of vulnerability and loneliness, hinting at a fragile ego beneath the veneer of aggression. This contradiction is crucial to understanding his motivations. It wasn't simply about being bullied. It was about a perceived lack of control and a desire for power, twisted into a horrific act of violence. The question becomes, how did this internal conflict manifest in his interactions with others? And did anyone recognize the warning signs? That's a crucial point. The idea of them solely as victims of bullying simplifies a complex issue. Klebold's profile presents another layer of complexity. He seemed more susceptible to suggestion, possibly influenced by Harris's dominant personality. His writings express a sense of despair and hopelessness, a yearning for connection, and a romantic fascination with death. While he participated in the planning and execution of the attack, some evidence suggests a degree of ambivalence, even remorse, in the days leading up to it. This raises the question of whether he would have taken this path without Harris's influence. We need to consider the dynamics of their relationship and the potential for a folie à deux dynamic, where one individual's delusional beliefs are adopted by another. This doesn't excuse Klebold's actions, but it provides context for understanding his role in this tragedy. Examining the writings and testimonies of those who knew them is crucial to disentangling their individual motivations and the complex interplay between them. Precisely. It's important to avoid simplistic narratives. The evidence points to Harris as the driving force, the mastermind. But Klebold's participation wasn't passive. Their journals and videos reveal a shared fascination with violence, a romanticized view of death, and a detachment from the potential consequences of their actions. This shared ideology, combined with Harris's manipulative tendencies, created a dangerous cocktail. The public perception of them as social outcasts needs to be balanced against their documented attempts to fit in, their involvement in school activities, and their interactions with other students. This contradiction is key to understanding the depth of their deception and the difficulty in predicting their violent outbursts. They weren't entirely isolated. They existed within the social fabric of the school, further complicating the task of identifying and addressing the warning signs. It's a chilling reminder of the difficulty in predicting such acts of violence. Their outward behavior didn't always align with their inner turmoil. This discrepancy between their public persona and private thoughts underscores the importance of recognizing the subtle signs of psychological distress. While not everyone who experiences these internal struggles will resort to violence, understanding the potential escalation from ideation to action is crucial for prevention. In the case of Columbine, the warning signs were arguably there, scattered throughout their writings and behaviors. The challenge lies in piecing together these fragmented pieces of information to form a complete picture of the individuals and their motivations. This requires a thorough and nuanced analysis, moving beyond superficial labels and delving into the complexities of human behavior. Investigators meticulously pieced together the timeline leading up to the Columbine High School massacre, uncovering a series of missed signals and chilling premonitions. The perpetrator's website, brimming with violent imagery and hateful rhetoric, was discovered, but its significance wasn't fully grasped until after the tragedy. Journal entries and home videos revealed the extent of their planning, including the construction of pipe bombs and the acquisition of firearms. A particular focus of the investigation was the role of the gun show loophole, which allowed the perpetrators to obtain weapons despite their age, and documented mental health issues. This raised serious questions about gun control legislation and the accessibility of firearms to potentially dangerous individuals. The sheer volume of evidence, including witness testimonies and physical evidence recovered from the school, presented a daunting task for investigators, who worked tirelessly to reconstruct the events of that horrific day. One of the most frustrating aspects of the investigation was the identification of missed opportunities to prevent the tragedy. Reports of prior threats and disturbing behavior by the perpetrators were downplayed or overlooked. There were instances of taunting communications and veiled threats directed at students and teachers, but these were not adequately investigated at the time. The focus on bullying as a potential motive initially led investigators down the wrong path, obscuring the deeper, more sinister motivations at play. The perpetrators' carefully constructed narrative of revenge against bullies, while partially true, masked their broader desire for infamy and a nihilistic fascination with violence. This misdirection hampered early stages of the investigation, delaying a full understanding of the complex psychological factors that drove the perpetrators. Amidst the devastation and despair, there were moments of false hope. Initially, the focus was on rescuing survivors and apprehending the perpetrators, assuming they had escaped the school. This led to a frantic search of the surrounding area, diverting resources from the grim reality inside the school. The discovery of unexploded bombs further complicated the situation, creating a sense of ongoing danger and delaying the recovery of victims. The scale of the tragedy was so immense that it took time for the full extent of the carnage to become clear. The initial reports of casualties were significantly underestimated, adding to the confusion and anguish in the aftermath. The investigation into the Columbine High School shooting served as a stark wake-up call for law enforcement, schools, and mental health professionals. It exposed critical gaps in communication, threat assessment protocols, and the understanding of adolescent psychology. The tragedy highlighted the need for increased vigilance in identifying and addressing warning signs of potential violence, as well as the importance of fostering a supportive and inclusive school environment. The lessons learned from Columbine have shaped subsequent responses to school shootings, emphasizing the need for proactive intervention and a multidisciplinary approach to preventing such tragedies. However, the ongoing occurrence of school shootings demonstrates the continuing challenge of translating these lessons into effective prevention strategies. The massacre at Columbine High School wasn't just a single event. It was a rupture in time, creating a before and an after for the entire community of Littleton, Colorado. The immediate aftermath was filled with grief, shock, and confusion. But the long-term emotional toll is a story that continues to unfold. We're talking about deep, persistent trauma that permeated every aspect of life in Littleton. Parents who lost children had to navigate a world irrevocably altered, grappling with the unimaginable pain of burying their own offspring. The surviving students, many of whom witnessed horrific acts of violence, carried the burden of survivors' guilt and the psychological scars of that day. The sheer scale of the tragedy left an enduring mark on the collective psyche of the town, fostering a sense of vulnerability and unease that lingered for years. Absolutely. The trauma manifested in various ways. Some survivors experienced debilitating anxiety, depression, and PTSD, struggling with flashbacks and nightmares. They faced challenges returning to school, navigating social situations, and rebuilding trust. The community, too, grappled with a heightened sense of fear and insecurity. Parents became more protective, schools implemented stricter security measures, and the very idea of a safe learning environment was shattered. Public memorials and commemorations, while intended to provide solace and a space for collective mourning, could also be re-traumatizing for some, forcing them to confront the horrific reality of what had happened. The long-term psychological impact of the Columbine shooting underscores the devastating consequences of gun violence, extending far beyond the immediate casualties. The ripple effect of this tragedy extended far beyond the immediate victims and their families. The entire community experienced a collective trauma, and the sense of safety and security was irrevocably shattered. Teachers and school staff, who were also deeply affected, had to cope with their own trauma while simultaneously supporting their students. First responders, including police officers, paramedics, and firefighters, witnessed scenes of unimaginable horror, leaving them with lasting emotional scars. The community's support system, including mental health professionals, religious leaders, and community organizations, were stretched thin as they tried to meet the overwhelming need for counseling and support in the wake of the tragedy. This collective trauma became a shared experience, binding the community together in grief and resilience, but also leaving a persistent undercurrent of anxiety and fear. One of the most challenging aspects of the Columbine tragedy was the pervasive sense of unease that settled over the community. Even years later, there was a lingering fear that something similar could happen again. This fear manifested in various ways, from increased security measures in schools to a heightened awareness of potential threats in public spaces. Parents struggled with the balance between protecting their children and allowing them to live normal lives. The constant media attention and the ongoing debates about gun control and school safety kept the tragedy fresh in people's minds, making it difficult to move forward and heal. The Columbine shooting became a symbol of school violence, and its legacy continues to shape how we think about school safety and the long-term psychological impact of mass shootings. The weeks leading up to the massacre painted a disturbing picture of Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold's descent. Their journals, later discovered by investigators, revealed meticulous planning, violent fantasies, and a deep-seated hatred for their classmates. They documented their growing arsenal, including shotguns, rifles, and pipe bombs, alongside detailed maps of the school and a planned schedule for the attack. The journals also contained chilling descriptions of their intended victims and a desire to inflict maximum casualties. This level of premeditation highlighted not only the severity of their intentions, but also the missed opportunities for intervention. The ease with which they acquired weapons, despite their documented behavioral issues, raised serious questions about the existing gun control laws and the responsibilities of the adults in their lives. It was a horrifying premonition of the tragedy to come. The sheer volume of evidence collected from their homes, computers, and personal belongings was overwhelming. Investigators sifted through hours of videotapes, known as the basement tapes, where Harris and Klebold recorded themselves ranting about their hatred, practicing with their weapons, and even bidding farewell. These tapes, though disturbing, provided crucial insights into their motives, mindsets, and the extent of their planning. They revealed a complex interplay of anger, resentment, and a desire for infamy. The tapes also provided a window into the culture of violence they had immersed themselves in, evident in their fascination with video games, violent movies, and Nazi ideology. These seemingly disparate elements combined to create a toxic brew that ultimately fueled their horrific actions. The investigation into the Columbine High School massacre was a monumental task, involving numerous law enforcement agencies, forensic experts, and psychological profilers. Reconstructing the events of that day, piecing together the fragmented narratives from survivors, and analyzing the vast amount of evidence collected from the scene was a painstaking process. The sheer scale of the violence and the number of victims made it one of the most complex crime scenes in American history. The investigation also brought to light the challenges faced by law enforcement in responding to active shooter situations and the need for improved communication and coordination between different agencies. The lessons learned from Columbine would forever change the way law enforcement approaches school shootings. The breakthrough in the investigation, while tragically too late, came from the meticulous examination of the evidence collected from the school and the perpetrators' homes. The journals, the basement tapes, and the witness testimonies all converged to paint a complete picture of the events leading up to the massacre and the identities of the perpetrators. While the immediate focus was on securing the scene, providing medical assistance to the wounded, and identifying the victims, the subsequent investigation sought to understand the why behind the horrific act. The investigation ultimately determined that Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold acted alone and that their actions were the result of a complex interplay of psychological factors, including depression, alienation, and a fascination with violence. The findings, though devastating, were crucial in piecing together the puzzle of Columbine. It's chilling, isn't it? To revisit the meticulous planning, the arsenal they amassed, the homemade bombs, the tactical vests. These weren't spur-of-the-moment actions. The journals, the videos, they reveal a deep-seated hatred, a desire for infamy, a twisted sense of revenge. And yet, these were teenagers, living seemingly ordinary lives in suburban America. They walked the same halls, ate in the same cafeteria, attended the same classes as their victims. How could such darkness fester undetected right beneath the surface of everyday life? The ease with which they acquired weapons, the online communities that fueled their rage, the warning signs missed or dismissed. It all paints a disturbing picture of a system that failed to protect its most vulnerable members. And the question remains, could something like this happen again? Absolutely. The unsettling truth is that Columbine became a blueprint, a horrific inspiration for subsequent school shootings. The readily available information online, the detailed accounts of their methods, their motives, it created a morbid playbook for others harboring similar resentments. We see echoes of Columbine in the attacks that followed, not just in the tactics employed, but also in the profiles of the perpetrators. Young, often isolated individuals, consumed by anger and a desire for notoriety. The copycat effect is undeniable, and it underscores the urgent need to address the root causes of this violence, the societal factors that contribute to such profound alienation and rage. We've made strides in school security, in threat assessment protocols, but have we truly confronted the underlying issues, the darkness that can lurk undetected in plain sight? That's the question that continues to haunt us. Even after all these years, we've examined the timeline, dissected the evidence, analyzed the psychological profiles, but the true heart of darkness remains elusive. How do we identify these individuals before they act? How do we penetrate the facade of normalcy to recognize the simmering rage beneath? Columbine forced us to confront the uncomfortable reality that evil doesn't always announce itself with grand pronouncements or overt threats. It can reside in the quiet kid in the back of the classroom, the seemingly ordinary teenager next door. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying aspect of this tragedy. The chilling reminder that the monsters we fear often wear the faces of our friends, our neighbors, our children. And so we're left with a profound unease, a lingering sense of vulnerability. Columbine shattered the illusion of safety within our schools, within our communities. It forced us to acknowledge the fragility of peace, the ever-present potential for violence to erupt from the most unexpected places. We can study the details, analyze the events, implement new security measures. But can we ever truly eradicate the potential for such darkness to emerge? That, perhaps, is the question that will continue to haunt us, long after the headlines fade and the memorials stand silent. What are the hidden signs, the subtle indicators that we're still missing? What can we do to prevent the next Columbine? And are we even asking the right questions? Thank you for walking with us through the shadows. The story doesn't end here. It lingers, echoing through time, reminding us that the darkest truths often hide in plain sight. Until next time, stay curious and stay vigilant. This case remains unsolved. Perhaps the truth is still out there.